The Nevada desert was a furnace that day. Heat shimmered above the baked sand, making the air ripple like liquid glass. The military testing range stretched for miles, a brutal landscape of dust, steel, and silence. At its center stood Lieutenant Commander Sarah Keegan, a figure of calm precision amid chaos. She adjusted the bipod of her Barrett M82.50 cal rifle, its matte black barrel glinting faintly in the sun. Sweat dripped down her neck, caught by the high collar of her Navy combat uniform. She was alone at the firing line, though she could feel the eyes of dozens of officers fixed on her from the observation stand. It wasn't every day that the Navy's top brass came to watch a live fire test, and certainly not one led by her. Sarah inhaled slowly, letting the air expand her lungs. Then she exhaled, one long, steady breath that cleared her mind. Her heartbeat slowed, her hands stilled. This was her world. Out here, there were no politics, no favoritism, only skill, precision, and respect earned by performance. Target distance, 800 meters, called the range officer, his voice breaking through the radio. Sarah didn't answer. She didn't need to. She looked downrange through her scope. 6 silhouette targets stood scattered across the sand, each barely visible against the haze. Her mission today wasn't just to hit them. It was to do it faster, cleaner, and more accurately than any previous record. Because this wasn't just another test. This was the Joint Tactical Evaluation, a performance that would determine who led the Navy's elite marksmanship program for the next decade. And Sarah Keegan, the only woman to ever qualify for that position, was about to take her shot. Her spotter, Lieutenant Marcus Hawley, crouched beside her, squinting at the readout. Winds at 7 knots, right cross. You'll need a half-mil adjustment. I've got it, she said, voice calm and clipped. Marcus grinned slightly. You always do. He'd worked with her for 3 years, long enough to know that when Sarah went quiet, it meant she was in that zone where everything else disappeared. The chatter, the noise, the politics, all gone. Just her, the rifle, and the horizon. The command tower buzzed faintly in the distance. Senior officers murmured behind tinted glass, analyzing her every move. She knew what they were thinking, not about her performance, but about her presence. She'd fought her way through every layer of bias the Navy could throw. They called her the cold scope, not out of admiration, but because she never cracked under pressure. When men twice her size tried to intimidate her on the range, she simply outshot them until their laughter turned to silence. Yet, no matter how many medals she earned, how many perfect scores she set, there was always someone waiting to remind her she didn't belong. And today, that someone was coming. Sarah's finger rested lightly on the trigger guard as she prepared to begin her calibration sequence. The heat pressed against her like a living thing. Every distant echo of metal, every gust of desert wind, felt amplified. She glanced up briefly toward the observation stand and froze. There, stepping out of a black SUV, was Admiral Dalton Reeves. Even at a distance, his presence carried weight. He was known across the Navy as a man of absolute authority and zero tolerance for defiance. His career stretched 3 decades, his reputation one of unchallenged dominance. If he entered a room, people stood straighter. If he gave an order, it was followed. And now, he was walking toward her range. Marcus muttered under his breath, "Oh, hell. He's not scheduled for this test." Sarah didn't answer. She simply watched as Reeves made his way through the dust, flanked by 2 aides. His uniform was spotless, decorated with ribbons that caught the light. His expression was unreadable, but the faint curl of disdain at his lips said enough. "He's here for you," Marcus whispered. "I know," she replied quietly. Reeves climbed the observation stairs and stood beside the officers in charge. After a brief word, he looked down toward Sarah. Even from 100 yards away, she could feel the weight of that stare, the kind that measured people not by merit, but by control. "Proceed, Lieutenant Commander," the range officer called out through the radio. His tone had shifted, nervous, unsure. The Admiral's arrival had changed everything. Sarah's jaw tightened. She adjusted her ear protection, aligned the rifle, and focused through the scope. The first target came into clear view, a black silhouette painted on steel. Her breathing slowed again. The world narrowed. Focus. Just as her finger began to curl against the trigger, the radio crackled again. "Hold your fire," came a sharp voice. The Admiral's. Sarah exhaled and lifted her head slightly. Reeves was coming down from the observation deck. Marcus shot her a warning glance. "Don't react," he whispered. "I won't," she murmured, though her pulse had begun to rise. The Admiral approached slowly, his boots kicking up dust. Each step echoed through the silence. Officers at the sidelines shifted uncomfortably. Even the wind seemed to die down. When he stopped in front of her, Sarah stood, rifle still resting on its stand. "Lieutenant Commander Keegan," Reeves said, his voice deep and deliberate. "I've heard quite a bit about you." "Sir?" she replied crisply. "Range test in progress." He smiled, though it wasn't friendly. "Oh, I'm aware. I just thought I'd see what all the fuss is about. The Navy seems quite proud of its sharpshooting star." The way he said it, star, sounded more like problem. Sarah didn't flinch. "My record speaks for itself, sir." He took a step closer, his gaze dropping to the rifle. "That it does. But records can be adjusted, especially when someone forgets their place." Marcus stiffened. "Sir, with respect, this is a secured range." Reeves cut him off with a raised hand. "At ease, Lieutenant. I'm simply here to observe." But his tone dripped with challenge. Sarah could feel the tension building like static in the air. The Admiral wasn't here for evaluation. He was here for confrontation. She lowered herself back behind the rifle, eyes through the scope, trying to ignore his presence. "Proceed," Reeves ordered flatly. She fired. One shot, perfect. A metallic ping echoed across the desert. Then another, bullseye again. For a brief moment, everything was as it should be. Precision, control, mastery. The Admiral said nothing. But as Sarah moved to reload, she felt movement beside her. Too close. Reeves had stepped forward, past the safety line. "Sir," Marcus began, but it was too late. Reeves leaned down, examining the weapon as if it were his. "You know, Keegan," he said softly, "in my day, we didn't hand out rifles like this to—" His words hung unfinished. Sarah's hands froze on the receiver. She didn't look up, but her voice cut through the dry air like a blade. "To what, Admiral?" she asked. For the first time, he hesitated. Then his smirk returned. "To those who forget that the Navy isn't a democracy." Sarah straightened slowly, eyes locking with his. There was no shouting, no threat, only a silent electric tension between them, the kind that precedes an explosion. Reeves studied her expression, then gave a cold chuckle. "We'll see how long that confidence lasts." He turned toward the range officer. "Restart the test. I'll personally oversee this one." And as the command echoed through the desert, Sarah knew the real battle had just begun. The desert heat had begun to shimmer harder now, a distorted dance of light blurring the horizon. Inside the firing zone, silence weighed heavy. The only sounds were the low hum of electronics and the faint rattle of wind rushing across spent shell casings. Sarah lay prone again, her cheek resting lightly against the rifle stock. Through her scope, 6 fresh targets waited. But her focus was fractured now. Not by the task, but by the man standing a few feet behind her. Admiral Dalton Reeves had claimed the range like it was his throne. His presence loomed over everyone. Officers who'd been chatting minutes ago now stood stiff, silent, afraid to breathe too loudly. Reeves didn't speak often, but when he did, it carried the weight of consequence. "Proceed when ready," came his voice, low, calm, and laced with challenge. Sarah adjusted her sights, her pulse steady, but her jaw tight. She lined up her next target and squeezed. Boom! The bullet tore through the air and struck dead center. Perfect. The spotter confirmed. Impact. Center mass. Confirmed. A small murmur rippled through the observers. They knew perfection when they saw it. But Reeves didn't move. His expression stayed blank, unimpressed. He leaned closer, his shadow falling over her scope. "Begin again," he said. "Sir?" Sarah looked up slightly. "Reset the shot. I want to see it without your wind compensation." She blinked, caught off guard. "Sir, that's a violation of safety protocol. The crosswind's up to 10 knots. Firing without adjustment risks. Are you questioning a direct order, Lieutenant Commander?" The range officer froze. Marcus clenched his fists, but stayed silent. Everyone knew this was no longer a test of marksmanship. It was a test of obedience. Sarah's voice remained steady. "Sir, my duty is to perform to regulation standards. Ignoring wind drift is reckless," and Reeves stepped closer. "Reckless?" He let out a dry laugh. "You think a little wind can stop a real sniper? You think the battlefield gives you time to measure air pressure and humidity? No. The battlefield rewards instinct, not arrogance hidden behind data." Sarah's face remained unreadable. But inside, a slow burn started behind her ribs. She'd heard these arguments before, from old guard officers who believed skill was about bravado, not precision. Men who'd never spent nights in Afghanistan calculating bullet drop through thin air, or watched lives depend on exact mathematics. "Permission to speak freely, sir," she said finally. "Denied?" Reeves cut in instantly, his smile widening. "Take the shot." A heavy silence hung in the air. Marcus whispered, "Sarah, don't. He's baiting you." She glanced at her spotter, then back through her scope. The wind had picked up. Fine sand spiraled across the range, distorting the view. She recalculated in her head, out of habit. Then she looked away from the target and locked eyes with Reeves. "With respect, sir," she said calmly, "if this is about proving authority, I suggest we do it somewhere that doesn't compromise safety." Reeves leaned down, close enough that his words were almost private. "You don't get to lecture me on safety, Lieutenant Commander. You just follow orders." She didn't flinch. "Even when they're wrong?" A few officers exchanged nervous glances. The tension was now tangible, sharp as barbed wire. Reeves straightened, his voice rising just enough for everyone to hear. "This, gentlemen, is what happens when the Navy gets too comfortable with bending the rules. You give a woman a rifle, and she starts thinking she runs the range." The words hit like a slap. Every man around them froze, not because they agreed, but because no one dared to react. Sarah's eyes darkened, though her face stayed perfectly composed. She didn't respond. Instead, she began adjusting her rifle again, focusing through the scope. "Target ready," she said softly. Her tone was calm, dangerously calm. Reeves smirked, satisfied with his dominance. "Then fire, Lieutenant Commander. Show us how perfect you are without your fancy math." Marcus took a step forward. "Sir, the crosswind." "Silence, Lieutenant." Reeves barked. The wind howled stronger now, like the desert itself was protesting. Sarah inhaled slowly. Her finger touched the trigger. For a split second, time stretched thin. She squeezed. The bullet tore out of the barrel, slicing through the gust. The recoil kicked into her shoulder. Downrange, the round struck inches off target. A single clang echoed. Not a miss, but not perfection either. Reeves' grin widened like a wound. "Well," he said loudly, turning to the observers, "seems our prodigy isn't immune to reality after all." A few nervous chuckles surfaced, the kind born from fear, not humor. Sarah didn't look up. She simply reloaded. Reeves continued, pacing slowly behind her. "You know what I see, Keegan? I see a soldier who hides behind procedure, who quotes manuals and thinks they make her bulletproof. The Navy needs warriors, not mathematicians." Sarah said nothing, but every word lodged deeper, pressing against years of silent endurance. When she finally spoke, her voice was measured, a blade under control. "With respect, sir, the Navy also needs leaders who understand the cost of arrogance." The range went silent. Marcus's eyes widened. "Sarah," he whispered. Reeves turned slowly, disbelief flickering into anger. "What did you just say?" "You heard me, sir." The Admiral's face hardened. "You're walking a very fine line, Lieutenant Commander." Sarah finally rose from the ground, standing tall, her rifle hanging by her side. "I'm walking the same line every soldier walks when they're forced to choose between following orders and doing what's right." The air was heavy now, too heavy. Even the officers at the edge of the range had gone still. Reeves stepped closer, so close that his reflection shimmered in her sunglasses. "You think you can lecture me about right and wrong? You, a range instructor?" "I'm a sailor, sir," she replied quietly. "And sailors follow rules for a reason, to keep each other alive." His lip curled. "You're not on a battlefield now, Keegan. You're in my range." Sarah's voice was almost a whisper. "No, sir. You're in mine." It was subtle, but the shift in tone cracked something invisible between them. The Admiral's nostrils flared. "Watch yourself, Lieutenant Commander." "I am," she said evenly, meeting his stare without blinking. "Every second." Reeves turned sharply to the observers. "Shut down the range. We're done here." But then he hesitated, looking back at the rifle, glinting under the sun. His pride wouldn't let him walk away. He stepped forward again, eyes locked on the weapon. "What makes you so special, Keegan?" He sneered. "You think this piece of hardware makes you untouchable?" He reached down, brushing his hand along the barrel. "This rifle belongs to the Navy, not you. You forget your place." Marcus moved, alarmed. "Sir, please don't touch the weapon." Reeves ignored him. His fingers closed around the handle, tilting the rifle slightly. "Maybe if you had a real man's grip." Sarah's eyes snapped up. Her voice, when it came, was cold enough to stop the wind. "Sir, step back." The words were soft, controlled, but they carried a gravity it froze everyone in place. Reeves looked down at her, smirking. "Or what, Lieutenant Commander?" Sarah didn't move, didn't blink. "You're crossing a safety line. Let go of the weapon." He laughed, a short, sharp sound that carried across the range. "You forget who gives orders here." Her voice dropped lower. "Not when lives are on the line, sir." And for the first time, Admiral Reeves' smile faltered. Sarah's hand was on the barrel now, not in defiance, but in control. Her muscles were coiled, her focus absolute. Marcus whispered under his breath, "Sarah, don't." But it was too late. Reeves' pride had already written the next moment. He tugged the rifle toward himself, and the air cracked with tension. The second he made contact, her instincts ignited. Her hand locked. Her stance shifted. Her breath steadied. Years of combat training, discipline, and suppressed fury aligned like a sniper's crosshair. And as the Admiral tightened his grip, she prepared to act, not out of anger, but necessity. The storm had officially begun. The desert seemed to stop breathing. Even the wind that had been sweeping the firing line only moments ago died down, as if the whole world sensed that something irreversible was about to happen. Admiral Dalton Reeves' fingers were still hooked around the rifle's handgrip, knuckles whitening against the matte steel. The weapon, Sarah Keegan's weapon, lay halfway between them, heavy and sacred, like a drawn sword between two combatants. "Sir," Sarah said again, her voice flat and calm, "release the firearm." The Admiral smirked, sweat streaking the corner of his temple. "You really think you can give me orders? You forget who signs your evaluations, Lieutenant Commander?" Her tone didn't change. "Safety Protocol, Section 12B, unauthorized handling of an armed rifle is a violation punishable by, oh, spare me the handbook." Reeves yanked slightly on the barrel. Not hard enough to break anything, but enough to show he could. The weapon twitched between them. Gasps rose from the line of observers. No one dared step forward. Marcus Hawley took half a pace closer. "Admiral, please." "That rifle's Lev." Chambers loaded. Reeves cut him off with a glare that could freeze lava. "Step back, Lieutenant." Sarah's jaw tightened. Her thumb slid off the safety instinctively, muscle memory guiding her hands the way years of training had wired them. She wasn't planning to shoot, but she was prepared for whatever came next. For one long, tense heartbeat, they were statues baked in sunlight, a commander defending order, an admiral defending ego. Then Reeves pulled. The motion was sudden, violent, and wrong. The rifle jerked toward him. Sarah's body reacted faster than thought. Her left hand seized his wrist, pivoting sideways. Her right shoulder dropped, using the rifle's weight as leverage. A single, sharp motion, a move drilled into her bones from countless combat scenarios. There was a crack, not from the weapon, but from flesh and bone. Reeves' cry tore through the still air, half rage, half disbelief. His hand bent backward at an impossible angle before he stumbled away, clutching it to his chest. Gasps erupted. Someone shouted, "Cease movement! Weapon safe!" Another yelled for a medic. Marcus darted forward, intercepting Reeves before he fell. Sarah didn't move. She stood perfectly still, rifle secure against her shoulder, breathing slow and measured. Her voice, when it came, was even. Range clear. Weapon secure. No discharge. The range officer, shaking, raised a trembling hand. "Range clear," he echoed, almost mechanically. For a few seconds, the world existed only in the echo of that single sound, the sound of power breaking. Reeves' aides rushed forward, supporting him. His face had gone pale. The bone in his wrist sat at a crooked angle beneath the skin. He glared up at Sarah, fury and humiliation warring in his eyes. You attacked a superior officer," he hissed. Sarah met his gaze. "You violated live fire safety. I neutralized a threat. You broke my..." She cut him off, not shouting, but commanding. "Sir, step out of the firing lane." Every spectator could feel it, the shift in control. The Admiral, decorated and revered, was the one being ordered now. Marcus swallowed hard. He'd seen firefights. He'd seen ambushes, but nothing like this. Not because of violence, but because of what it meant. The moment was more than one officer defending procedure. It was an unmasking of a hierarchy that had forgotten its own rules. Reeves tried to stand taller, tried to reassert the command voice that had once cowed entire platoons. "You're finished. Keegan. Court-martial. Dishonor. You'll never..." Sarah turned away before he could finish, kneeling beside her rifle. She ran a safety check, every motion deliberate and audible. Click, eject, inspect. "Weapon cleared," she announced. It was as if she were reporting to the desert itself rather than the Admiral. When she stood again, the officers at the sidelines instinctively straightened. Even the range commander, gray-haired Captain Merritt, had to remind himself to breathe. "Lieutenant Commander," Merritt began hesitantly, "perhaps you should step aside." "We'll handle." "With respect, sir," Sarah said, "I'd like to complete my evaluation." Merritt blinked. "Now?" "Yes, sir." "I'm within schedule." Reeves barked out a pained laugh. "You can't possibly think." But Merritt held up a hand, torn between duty and disbelief. "Admiral, she's not under suspension yet." Reeves' eyes blazed. "Yet?" Marcus leaned closer to Sarah, whispering, "You sure about this?" She looked downrange. "If I stop now, the story ends here, his version." He hesitated, then nodded once. "Then let's make it count." The range fell silent again as Sarah lay prone once more, ignoring the throbbing chaos around her. Reeves sat on the ground now, cradling his wrist, his pride bleeding more than his flesh. Medics hovered, but didn't dare approach until ordered. Everyone watched the woman who had just done the unthinkable and was now preparing to shoot again. "Targets verified?" Sarah asked. Captain Merritt cleared his throat. "Confirmed. 6 targets, 800 meters. Recording on?" "Yes," Sarah inhaled. The familiar rhythm returned, the heartbeat slowing calm that came before every perfect shot. The sun burned low on the horizon, tinting the sand in gold. Heat waves shimmered, distorting the targets like ghosts. She adjusted for crosswind, rechecked elevation, and whispered to Marcus, "Ready." "Spotter ready," he replied. "Focus, don't think. Just breathe." She exhaled. Boom. The first target fell. Before the echo faded, boom. The second. A third. A fourth. Her rhythm became music, mechanical yet graceful. 6 shots in total, each punctuated by the clean, metallic ring of impact. When the last bullet struck home, Sarah lifted her head. The smell of burnt powder lingered in the air. Marcus was grinning despite himself. 6 for 6. Perfect grouping. Sarah stood, slinging the rifle across her shoulder. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes carried a quiet fire. Captain Merritt finally found his voice. "Lieutenant Commander Keegan, you just set a new range record." Reeves muttered something under his breath, too low for anyone to catch. He was shaking, whether from pain or fury. No one could tell. Sarah turned to him, saluted sharply. "Request permission to exit the range, sir." The irony in the words hung heavy. Reeves said nothing. Merritt nodded awkwardly. "Permission granted, Lieutenant Commander." She stepped off the line, walking past rows of stunned officers. Every pair of eyes followed her. Not one dared to speak until she was gone. Only then did Marcus exhale. "Well," he said quietly to the captain, "guess that answers any doubts about her aim." An hour later, in the base medical wing, Reeves sat rigid as a medic wrapped his wrist in a temporary cast. The painkillers hadn't dulled his humiliation. Across the room, Merritt filed his preliminary report, each word measured like stepping through a minefield. Reeves' aide tried to break the silence. "Sir, we can. Spin this. Say it was an accident, maybe." Reeves' glare silenced him. "No," he said finally, voice trembling with rage. "This isn't over. She'll pay for this." "But sir, the footage." "I don't care about footage. She assaulted a superior. The rest is noise." Merritt looked up from his desk. "With respect, Admiral, every camera on that range was active. The board will see everything." Reeves stood abruptly, wincing as pain shot through his arm. "Then I'll make sure they see it my way." He stormed out, leaving behind the smell of antiseptic and the sound of paper trembling under the ceiling fan. Outside, under the fading orange sky, Sarah sat alone on the tailgate of a Humvee. Her rifle rested across her knees, disassembled and clean. The desert was quiet again, only the wind whispering across the dunes. Marcus approached, holding 2 bottles of water. He handed one to her. "You know you just lit a match in a powder room, right?" She took a long sip, then nodded. He was going to pull the trigger on my career either way. Marcus leaned against the Humvee beside her. Still, snapping the Admiral's wrist wasn't exactly subtle. "It wasn't about him," she said softly. "It was about the rifle. The rule. The line that keeps people alive." He studied her for a moment, then shook his head with a grin. "You realize half the base probably thinks you're a legend now?" Sarah gave a faint smile. "And the other half wants me court-martialed." "Yeah," he said, "but legends survive court-martials." She looked out toward the endless horizon where the sun had just disappeared. "Maybe, but truth survives longer." For a moment, they sat in silence, the hum of distant generators filling the air. Somewhere behind them, the lights of the command building flickered on, where Reeves was already writing his report, where the machine of military politics was beginning to turn. Sarah knew the storm wasn't over. It had just found its voice. By dawn, the story had already outgrown the desert. The footage, grainy, sun-glared, but clear enough to see every detail, had been uploaded to the Navy's internal review server just after midnight. 6 shots, 6 clean hits, a shattered wrist, and a woman who didn't flinch. It should have remained classified, sealed under the usual incident protocol. But someone, somewhere, leaked it. By sunrise, half the Pacific Command had seen it. At first, it circulated as rumor. "Did you hear about the Admiral who got disarmed by a sniper?" One officer whispered in the mess hall. By noon, it was playing on loop in secure training rooms, the silent awe spreading faster than any official memo could contain. Some laughed in disbelief. Others called it mutiny. Sarah Keegan, meanwhile, sat in a cold conference room at Coronado Base, hands clasped, eyes steady on the wall opposite her. 2 guards stood by the door, not because she was dangerous, but because she was a headline waiting to explode. The door opened with a heavy creak. Captain Merritt walked in first, followed by a woman Sarah had never seen before. She was sharp-featured mid-40s, wearing a dark gray suit instead of a uniform. The air changed with her arrival authority, without rank insignia. "Lieutenant Commander Keegan," she began, setting a tablet on the table. "I'm Commander Lydia Voss, Naval Intelligence Liaison. You understand why you're here?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good," Voss said. "Then let's get one thing clear. You're not under arrest. Yet." Merritt flinched slightly at the word. Sarah didn't react. Voss tapped her tablet, and a muted video played the footage from the range. She fast-forwarded to the moment Reeves grabbed the rifle, then slowed it down frame by frame. "Explain what happened here." Sarah's voice was calm, almost detached. "The Admiral reached for my weapon during a love fire session. I responded according to safety protocol. By breaking his wrist? He refused to release the firearm, ma'am. A loaded .50 caliber rifle is not a toy." Voss paused the video. The screen froze on the instant Reeves' hand snapped backward. She studied it quietly. "You realize that from a political standpoint, this is catastrophic." Merritt cleared his throat. "Ma'am, with respect, the recording supports her statement. I'm not questioning the facts." "Captain," Voss interrupted, "I'm questioning how it looks. The optics. A junior officer physically subdues an admiral during a public demonstration. The kind of thing that doesn't just bruise egos, it shakes institutions." Sarah said nothing. She knew every word was true. Voss leaned forward slightly. "Tell me, Lieutenant Commander, did you intend to humiliate him?" Sarah met her gaze. "No, ma'am. I intended to prevent a negligent discharge." Voss's lips curved faintly, not quite a smile. Practical answer. Not the kind people remember, though. Outside the room, word had already spread through the base. Some whispered her name like legend. Others avoided it like a curse. In the Sniper Division barracks, a dozen trainees huddled around a tablet screen. She actually hit all 6 targets after that? One asked. Not just hit, another replied. Grouped within 6 inches. That's unreal. She's either insane or the best sniper alive, a third muttered. Marcus Holley, passing through the hallway, paused as he caught the tail end of the conversation. She's both, he said quietly, then walked off before anyone could reply. Back inside, Voss's tone had softened. You've got a lot of support in the ranks, Keegan. People see what you did as necessary, even admirable. But up top, that's a different story. Merritt folded his hands. Ma'am, surely the review board. The review board is being chaired by Admiral Reeves himself, Voss said dryly. So unless we suddenly invent time travel to undo the video, I'd say Lieutenant Commander Keegan here has a problem. Sarah finally spoke again. What's the next step? Formal review, Voss replied. You'll be placed on restricted duty until then. No field operations, no weapons clearance. Sarah nodded once. Understood. Voss studied her for a long moment. You don't seem worried. Worry doesn't change physics, Sarah said. The footage will show the truth. Voss sighed, muttering something that sounded like, You really believe that still matters. She stood, collecting her tablet. You'll be notified when the hearing's scheduled. Captain, see she gets quarters off the main barracks. We don't need the press sniffing around. When they left, the room fell quiet again. Sarah stayed seated for a long time, her reflection in the glass opposite her faint and ghostly. She thought of the rifle, the precision, the silence, the way everything made sense when her finger touched the trigger. Now, for the first time, everything was noise. That night, Marcus found her sitting by the docks, boots dangling above the water. The San Diego skyline shimmered across the bay, reflections bending in the waves. He dropped a brown paper bag beside her. Dinner. Cold but edible. She smiled faintly. How's the rumor mill? Louder than a machine gun. Half the officers think you'll be fired. The other half are printing your face on morale posters. She snorted softly. Morale posters, huh? Yeah, you're the sniper who broke an admiral and a record in the same minute. People love symmetry. He handed her a soda can. You ever think about just walking away? Before this gets uglier? Sarah looked out over the water, the reflection of aircraft lights blinking in her eyes. If I walk away, he wins. And the next woman behind a scope is told to smile more instead of being trusted. Marcus nodded. Then you're staying. I'm staying. They sat in silence for a while. The hum of the naval base at night filled the air low, constant, alive. Somewhere far out, a carrier horn echoed. Marcus broke the quiet. You know what's crazy? For all his rank, Reeves forgot what that rifle means. Sarah turned her head slightly. Which is? He gestured toward the bay. Responsibility, precision, power that doesn't forgive mistakes. She exhaled slowly. That's why I didn't. 2 days later, the hearing was announced. A closed session. Restricted attendance. Internal disciplinary review, the memo read, but everyone knew it was theater. The brass wanted a scapegoat, and Reeves wanted a headline that erased his humiliation. Marcus slipped a note under Sarah's door the night before. They're not after the truth, they're after the narrative. When she arrived at the hearing room, 3 flags stood behind the board table. The stars and stripes, the Navy ensign, and a black flag with gold trimmed the mark of senior review. Reeves sat at the center, wrist in a cast, face unreadable. She saluted. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Keegan, reporting as ordered. The senior adjudicator, a silver-haired Vice Admiral named Huntley, nodded curtly. At ease. This proceeding concerns the conduct of Lieutenant Commander Keegan during a live-fire exercise dated July 12th. Allegations include use of unnecessary force and insubordination. Sarah stood tall. Understood, sir. Reeves leaned back in his chair. We have all seen the footage, he began. We know what you did. With respect, sir, Sarah said, you've seen what happened. Not why. Murmurs rippled through the board. Huntley raised a hand. Proceed. Sarah stepped forward. During the exercise, the Admiral reached for an armed weapon without clearance. Standard protocol required immediate intervention to prevent a potential discharge. Reeves interrupted, voice sharp. You could have warned me. I did, twice. Not sufficiently. Sarah's eyes flashed. With respect, sir, any hesitation could have killed someone. A silence heavier than steel filled the room. Every pair of eyes turned between them, between authority and truth, between pride and discipline. Huntley leaned back. The footage corroborates her statement. The force used was proportionate, given the risk. Reeves' jaw clenched. You're not suggesting we commend her? No, Huntley said slowly. But neither will we condemn her unjustly. Reeves opened his mouth to protest, but Voss, standing quietly in the corner, spoke for the first time. The real problem isn't this room, she said. It's what's outside of it. This video is viral. Civilians are already calling her a hero. If you bury her, Admiral, you'll look like you're punishing competence. The silence that followed was suffocating. Reeves said nothing, but his eyes, cold and venomous, promised the fight wasn't over. When the session adjourned, Sarah stepped into the hallway, shoulders heavy but head high. Marcus was waiting there, leaning against the wall. How bad? He asked. They didn't hang me, she said. That's good, but they didn't clear me either. He smiled wryly. Welcome to politics, sniper. She looked past him, out through a window overlooking the Pacific. Then it's not over yet. No, Marcus said softly. It's just starting. By the time the Navy's Public Affairs Office issued their first statement, it was already too late. The video had escaped the confines of military channels and burst into the civilian world like a detonated truth bomb. First it hit veteran forums, then defense blogs, then Reddit. Within hours, it was trending under a dozen hashtags. Hashtag Desert Range Incident, hashtag The Six Shots, and most explosively, hashtag Lieutenant Keegan. By morning, every major network was replaying the same 14-second clip. An admiral reaching for a weapon he shouldn't have. A calm woman snapping his hand away with surgical precision, and 6 flawless shots that followed. For the first time in decades, the American public was arguing not over politics or sports, but over military ethics, gender, and power. On one end, pundits called Sarah Keegan a national disgrace. Unacceptable, arced one retired general on a morning show. She assaulted her commanding officer, period. The uniform depends on order. Without that, you have chaos. But others saw something entirely different. She didn't attack, countered a female veteran advocate. She enforced safety protocol against someone abusing authority. That's not defiance, it's courage. Soon, memes appeared. Don't touch her rifle t-shirts sold out online. Someone remixed her 6 shots into a music track titled Trigger Discipline. Even Hollywood bloggers speculated about which actress would play her in the inevitable movie. Sarah, however, wanted none of it. Inside her temporary quarters on base, she watched the chaos unfold from a small government-issued laptop. The faces on the screen debated her life like it was a game. Each pundit twisted her actions into a different version of truth hero, villain, feminist icon, rogue soldier. She muted the sound, staring at her own image frozen mid-turn, rifle braced, dust swirling around her boots. She closed the laptop. Silence was easier to face than distortion. The knock came 3 minutes later. Marcus leaned against the doorframe, holding 2 cups of bad coffee. "You look like someone who's been watching cable news for too long." "I made it 10 minutes this time," Sarah said dryly. "New record." He handed her a cup. "You're famous, you know. Some senators already tweeting about you." "That's not fame," she said quietly. "That's weaponized attention." Marcus smirked. "Still, pretty good aim for a villain." Her eyes flicked up. "You think I'm a villain?" "Not even close," he said. "But Reeves does. And he's not done." He was right. At that very moment, Admiral Reeves sat in a soundproof conference room at the Pentagon, his casted wrist resting heavily on the table. Across from him were 4 officers in uniform, and 1 civilian in a tailored suit. Public Affairs Director Calvin Maury. "This situation is spiraling." "Sir?" Maury said, sliding a stack of printed headlines across the table. "You can't fight social media with silence." "I don't need to fight it," Reeves growled. "I just need to end her." "Sir," one of the officers began cautiously, "the footage clearly shows." "I don't care what it shows." Reeves slammed his uninjured hand down. "Do you have any idea how this makes us look?" An admiral humiliated on camera by his own subordinate. "It's a stain." Maury adjusted his glasses. "Then maybe the solution isn't suppression. Maybe it's rebranding." Reeves' eyes narrowed. "Explain." "Turn her into a cautionary tale," Maury said calmly. "Promote discipline. Emphasize that she acted out of line, even if her intentions were good. Make her the example of what not to do." Reeves leaned back, a cruel smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You mean, make her famous for the wrong reasons?" "Exactly." 2 days later, the Navy's official statement hit every news cycle at once. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Keegan acted outside established chain of command procedures during a supervised weapons demonstration. While her technical proficiency is not in question, her actions compromise the order and discipline of the U.S. Navy. Further administrative review is underway. The spin worked for about a day. Then an anonymous source leaked the internal safety report. It confirmed everything Sarah had claimed. Reeves had violated multiple live-fire protocols. The weapon had indeed been loaded. She had given 2 verbal warnings before acting. The internet flipped again, harder this time. Now the headlines read, "Report confirms Admiral endangered personnel." Reeves' reputation began to fracture like his wrist. At the base, reporters camped outside the gates, hoping for a glimpse of Sarah. The Navy tried to control access, but drones hovered above anyway. Her name was now international. Foreign media ran stories about the woman who disarmed power itself. Commander Lydia Voss arrived unannounced one afternoon, closing Sarah's laptop before she could reopen it. "Enough," Voss said. "You're not going to win this by watching it." "I'm not trying to win," Sarah said. "I'm just trying to survive it." Voss pulled up a chair. "You may not have a choice anymore. The Pentagon's split. Half want you discharged quietly. The other half thinks promoting you could turn this into a PR victory." Sarah blinked. "Promote me?" Voss shrugged. "Nothing silences controversy like success." "I didn't do any of this for politics," Sarah said sharply. "Doesn't matter," Voss replied. "The minute someone filmed it, it stopped being your story." That night, Sarah found herself unable to sleep. She walked the perimeter of the base, the moonlight silvering the chain-link fences. Every sound, the hum of generators, the distant clang of metal, reminded her of the discipline she loved, the life she'd built on precision, not popularity. She paused by the shooting range. The targets had been replaced, the sand smoothed over, as if nothing had happened. But she could still feel the moment, the pull, the twist, the recoil, the silence afterward. She crouched and traced a finger through the dust. Rules save lives, she whispered to herself, even if they break careers. Behind her, Marcus's voice broke the quiet. You're talking to ghosts again? She smiled faintly without turning. Maybe they're better company. He joined her, holding a file. Got something you might want to see. Voss pulled it from the restricted system. Inside were photos frames from the original video, annotated in red. What's this? Sarah asked. Evidence chain. Turns out someone edited an early version to make you look more aggressive. She frowned. Who? Guess, Marcus said. She didn't have to. Reeves. The implication hit like a sniper round. The Admiral hadn't just lied, he'd manipulated evidence. The narrative war wasn't accidental. It was engineered. By the next morning, word reached Voss. She moved fast. Within hours, she confronted Reeves in his Washington office. You doctored internal footage, Admiral. That's tampering with classified evidence. Reeves didn't even flinch. You can't prove I did. I don't have to, Voss said. But I can make sure the Inspector General sees the discrepancies. Reeves leaned forward, eyes cold. You think anyone will believe a field commander over a flag officer? Voss's tone turned razor-sharp. Not me, Admiral. But the woman you tried to destroy? The entire country already believes her. For the first time, Reeves' expression flickered just slightly. Later that evening, Sarah stood by the docks again, watching the ocean roll under the setting sun. Marcus joined her, holding his phone out. You might want to see this, he said, showing her a news feed. Breaking. Investigation opens into Admiral Reeves' conduct. Sarah stared at the headline, the wind tugging her hair. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel hunted, just still. Marcus smiled. Guess the truth's finally catching up. Sarah nodded slowly. Truth's got better aim than I do. He laughed softly. That's saying something. She took a deep breath, the salt air filling her lungs. For the first time since that day on the range, she let herself feel a trace of relief. Not victory, just clarity. The kind that comes when smoke finally clears and you see what's left standing. Reeves will fight back, Marcus warned. I know, she said. But I'm not afraid of him anymore. Why? She looked out toward the horizon, where the ocean met the sky in a thin, unbroken line. Because I already faced him once, she said. And I didn't miss. Rain came hard that night over Washington, turning the city into a blur of light and reflection. The downpour soaked the marble steps of the Pentagon, washing dust from the nation's seat of power, but it couldn't wash away what was coming. Inside a secure conference room, Admiral Dalton Reeves stared at a table covered in files, reports, and one glowing laptop screen. His cast was gone, replaced by a stiff brace that clicked faintly whenever he clenched his fist. He'd been summoned by the Inspector General's office, but he wasn't there to apologize. He was there to survive. Admiral Reeves, said the investigator across the table, a calm man in a dark blue uniform. You've been accused of altering classified video evidence related to the July 12th incident. Can you confirm or deny these claims? Reeves' eyes, cold and sharp, flicked up. I deny them entirely. My staff handled the footage. I never altered a thing. And yet, the man said, tapping the screen, metadata shows edits made under your credentials at 0200 hours. 2 days after the incident. Reeves leaned back slowly. My password could have been used by anyone. Possible, the investigator said, but unlikely. From the corner, Commander Lydia Voss watched quietly. She'd been called in as a witness, not an accuser, but everyone in the room knew she was the one who had found the discrepancies. Reeves knew it too. His eyes lingered on her longer than necessary, a silent threat behind his measured composure. Voss said nothing. She didn't need to. The storm outside was doing all the talking. Across the country, on the West Coast, Sarah Keegan was summoned again, this time not for discipline, but for duty. The call came from Captain Merritt. "Pack your gear, Lieutenant Commander. You've been cleared for temporary reactivation. Joint training exercise in Nevada. Classified." Sarah hesitated. "Is this punishment disguised as purpose?" He sighed. "Maybe. Or maybe someone up there wants to test if you're still loyal." She almost smiled. "Then I'll give them an answer they won't forget." 2 days later, Sarah stood once again in the desert, the same endless stretch of sand and wind that had started everything. But this time, she wasn't the only legend there. A dozen elite snipers from multiple branches lined the range, each handpicked for a cross-branch competition. At the far end of the field, cameras waited again, official, not secret. This wasn't just an exercise. It was theater. Marcus Hawley met her with a grin. "Déjà vu?" "More like unfinished business," she said, checking her rifle. It wasn't her old Barrett. This one was a prototype, sleek, matte black, with her name engraved in small letters near the bolt. "Keegan, evaluation model." He whistled. "They named it after you?" "Looks that way. Guess you're not as restricted as you thought." Sarah set the rifle down and scanned the lineup. Across from her stood a Marine sniper team, young, cocky, and whispering among themselves. To her left, 2 Air Force sharpshooters with custom optics. To her right, a pair of British guests from Allied forces. It wasn't just a test, it was a showcase. Back in Washington, Voss received a sealed envelope stamped "Eyes Only." Inside was a memo from the Office of Naval Intelligence. Subject: Operation Sandline Note. Joint exercise serving dual-purpose performance. Assessment and cover for ongoing inquiry into Admiral Reeves' alleged misconduct. Keegan's deployment authorized by upper command. Monitor media discretion. She exhaled sharply. They were using Sarah, again, both as bait and as proof. If she failed, Reeves could spin the narrative. If she succeeded, he'd be cornered. Either way, it was a battlefield dressed as bureaucracy. At dawn, the firing range came alive. Each sniper was assigned 6 moving targets, 1 kilometer away, simulated under crosswinds of 20 knots. Dust devils twisted between the firing lanes like ghosts, challenging even the best. Sarah dropped prone, adjusted her scope, and took a deep breath. "Wind's nasty," Marcus said from her side. "Good," she murmured. "Let it test us." The horn blared. Targets began to move erratic, unpredictable. Boom. First shot clean. Target 1 down. Boom. Second miss by an inch. Wind shifted left. Adjust. She rolled her shoulder, recalibrated. The others fired in rapid succession. The air filled with thunder and echo. Boom. Third hit. Fourth, another clean mark. Sweat trickled down her neck, but her mind was steel. Every pull of the trigger was its own language call, deliberate, deadly. The final 2 targets darted across the ridge, half hidden behind heat shimmer. Sarah adjusted, whispered the math to herself, and fired twice in rhythm. Both targets dropped. 6 confirmed, Marcus called. When she lifted her head, the silence from the observers told her what she already knew. She'd outshot every one of them. By noon, her name was trending again, this time not because of scandal, but skill. The Navy's press team released official footage showing her precision and professionalism. The tone had shifted. The narrative was rewriting itself in real time. But not everyone was celebrating. In his Pentagon office, Reeves watched the feed in silence. His jaw ticked once, twice, before he snapped the laptop shut. He picked up his phone. "Get me Colonel Rains in Internal Affairs," he ordered. "Now." Moments later, Rains appeared on his screen, a weary man with a trimmed beard and suspicious eyes. "Dalton," Rains said slowly, "you're on thin ice already. What are you planning?" "I'm cleaning up," Reeves replied. "Keegan's success doesn't change the fact that she disobeyed direct orders. If I can prove misconduct on her record, I can still discredit her." Rains frowned. "And if the evidence doesn't exist, then we make it exist." Meanwhile, Sarah received word of her next assignment. Debrief at Command West, San Diego. She suspected it wasn't about performance. When she entered the briefing room, Voss was waiting, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "Nice shooting," Voss said. "You just made every analyst in D.C. lose their lunch break." Sarah smiled faintly. "I wasn't trying to." "I know. That's why it worked." Voss handed her a folder. "Reeves isn't finished. We intercepted communications. He's planning to leak falsified records, claims of insubordination, unauthorized missions, even mental health concerns." Sarah's eyes hardened. "He's going to call me unstable." "Yes, it's classic. Discredit the witness before she testifies." Sarah exhaled slowly. "Then I testify louder." Voss tilted her head. "Careful. Truth's a weapon, but it can backfire." Sarah stood. So can silence. That evening, Sarah sat in the base's old hangar, cleaning her rifle in the dim light. Marcus joined her, holding a manila envelope. "What's that?" she asked. "Reeves' service file," he said. Voss pulled strings. Inside were old mission reports, commendations, and something unexpected. A confidential reprimand, 15 years earlier, for an unauthorized live-fire demonstration resulting in minor injury to a subordinate. It had been buried, classified under training accident. Sarah stared at it. "He's done this before." Marcus nodded. "Only difference is, the last one didn't have a camera." She closed the folder, her mind already working. "Then we don't fight him with words. We fight him with proof." A week later, Sarah and Voss presented the old file to the review board. Reeves was already there, smug and confident, ready to announce his new findings. But when Voss laid the reprimand on the table, his expression froze. "This," she said coldly, "was suppressed under your authority. It establishes a pattern of negligence." Reeves' mouth opened, but no sound came. The room fell silent. "Admiral Reeves," said Vice Admiral Huntley, "you are hereby relieved of command pending full investigation." Reeves' chair scraped the floor as he stood, pale and furious. "You think this ends me?" Voss met his glare. "No," she said. "You ended yourself the day you grabbed that rifle." Later, outside the hearing room, Sarah leaned against the wall, finally exhaling years of tension. Marcus joined her, clapping her lightly on the shoulder. "You did it," he said. "Not yet," she replied. "The truth still needs to land." Voss approached, expression softer now. "It will. The Navy can't bury this one." Sarah looked past them, through the tall glass window toward the horizon, where sunlight cut through the clouds. "Then maybe," she said quietly, "it's time to stop surviving and start rebuilding." That night, she returned to the range empty, quiet, peaceful. She set up her rifle, aimed at 6 fresh targets under the moonlight, and fired. 6 perfect hits. No cameras. No audience. No politics. Just the rhythm she loved. When she lowered the rifle, she smiled to herself and whispered, "For once, this shot's just for me." Washington's skyline glittered in the late afternoon sun. But the city's beauty masked a storm brewing inside the Pentagon. Admiral Dalton Reeves had been removed from command officially, but that didn't mean he was finished. He moved in shadows now, quietly pulling strings, quietly whispering to influential contacts, quietly plotting. The word among senior officers was clear. Don't underestimate him. He's dangerous when cornered. Reeves, once untouchable, now carried a silent fury, a resentment that had grown sharp enough to cut steel. Every public accolade for Sarah Keegan, every media headline praising her discipline and precision, stung him like fire. And fire demanded fuel. Back on base, Sarah sensed it. Even with Reeves sidelined, the aftershocks were visible in the way certain officers glanced at her. Cautious, resentful, wary. Not everyone wanted her exposed, precise, untouchable. Some wanted her neutralized before she became inconvenient. Marcus Hawley noticed it too. Something's off, he said, leaning against the barracks wall. I've been noticing subtle changes in behavior. Officers asking for reports, whispers behind doors. It's Reeves' influence. He's working from the shadows. Sarah frowned. Then we need to stay 2 steps ahead. The next morning, an encrypted email arrived in Sarah's secure inbox. It contained 3 scanned documents and a note typed in simple, cold font. Your competence has caused embarrassment. Cease all actions that reflect on command, or consequences will escalate. No signature. No trace. But she knew. Only one man could orchestrate this. Reeves. Marcus read over her shoulder. That's threatening. She didn't flinch. It's predictable. Predictable, maybe. But it's dangerous. He's cornered, Sarah. Cornered predators bite hardest. She folded the email, her mind already processing. Then we fight smarter, not harder. We document. We anticipate. Every move recorded, traceable. No shadows he can hide in. Marcus nodded. And if he escalates anyway? Then we hit back with light. Not bullets, she said. Transparency. Evidence. Proof. She had learned the hard way. Fear could never be her guide. Meanwhile, Reeves moved with silent precision. He contacted sympathetic admirals still loyal to his ideology, carefully framing Sarah's actions as a dangerous precedent. Unauthorized actions, risk to senior officers, potential legal violations. He framed her competence as chaos in uniform. His campaign was subtle, bureaucratic warfare. Memos leaked to media contacts, whispers in committees, manipulation of internal reviews. The Inspector General's office received dozens of anonymous complaints about Sarah's conduct, each phrased to cast doubt on her judgment. It was less about the truth than the perception of it a classic weapon of those desperate to reclaim control. Sarah, sensing the storm, met with Voss in a quiet briefing room. Reeves is mobilizing every resource he can find, Voss said bluntly. He's painting you as insubordinate, reckless, even psychologically unstable. Publicly, he's trying to claim he's the victim. Sarah's hands rested on the table. He doesn't understand why I act the way I do. Or maybe he does, and that's the problem. He knows precision, discipline, integrity, and that scares him. Voss nodded. You can't underestimate him, but we can counter him. Keep your actions above reproach. Keep records. Stick to the truth. The moment you stray into interpretation, he'll pounce. Sarah swallowed. Then the question becomes, how far do I let him go before I confront him directly? That's a dangerous line, Voss warned. One misstep and this could ruin not just your career, but the Navy's credibility. Across the base, tension mounted like static electricity. Every drill felt sharper, every instruction examined for subtle traps. Sarah's every move was scrutinized, not by rank, but by fear. Some senior officers muttered behind closed doors, "She's too good, too fearless. Others whispered, "This will end badly." Sarah knew it. Every perfect shot she took in training was not just practice, it was proof. Proof that she could perform under scrutiny. Proof that she could survive Reeves' shadow war. Proof that truth could be wielded as a weapon. Then came the breaking point. A Thursday afternoon alert. A junior officer reported seeing confidential files in the hands of someone unauthorized. Among them, early video footage from the range, unedited, showing every warning Sarah gave Reeves before she reacted. Marcus leaned over the screen. That's... someone's trying to rewrite the narrative. If this leaks, it looks like you were aggressive from the start. Sarah's jaw tightened. Then we contain it. We trace it. Whoever touches that footage will be held accountable. Hours later, she discovered the breach. A computer in the Pentagon's IT wing had accessed the files remotely. The signature traced back not conclusively, but strongly to an IP used by Reeves' personal office. The pattern was clear. He wasn't done. He was testing her patience, her reactions, her ability to control the narrative. The Navy's internal communications erupted. Voss coordinated a countermeasure. All unverified files quarantined. Every journalist contact alerted to an internal investigation which promised transparency and full accountability. Still, outside, social media had picked up on whispers. Keegan under investigation again. Civilians speculated. Veterans debated. Some began questioning whether the Navy itself could be trusted to protect its people. Sarah sat in a secure conference room, watching the storm brew in real time on a secure feed. The Navy's reputation, Reeves' legacy, and her own integrity all collided in an invisible battlefield of perception. Marcus sighed. "This isn't a sniper fight anymore," he muttered. "It's a political war." Sarah's eyes were steady, cold, precise. "Then we fight it the same way. Aim for clarity. Hit truth. Every single time." Reeves, in his private quarters, received another report. The Inspector General had officially opened a review into his attempts to manipulate files and witnesses. He slammed his fist against the desk. He had underestimated Sarah Keegan once, twice, but the third time, he would ensure the rules bent in his favor. He would not lose. And Sarah? She would not let him win. That evening, Sarah returned to the firing range. The desert was silent under a low-hanging moon. She loaded her rifle with deliberate precision, taking slow, even breaths. Each target she lined up was more than practice. Each was preparation, a meditation in focus. She fired 6 shots. Each struck perfectly. No audience. No cameras. No politics. Just skill. And a reminder, she could always control her own aim, even if she couldn't control the shadows waiting to strike. Marcus watched quietly. "Every time, flawless," he said. "It's not enough to hit the target," Sarah replied softly. "It's about surviving the battle after the shot." He nodded. "Then the battle's just beginning." Sarah glanced toward the distant horizon, where the first light of dawn was bleeding into the sky. "Then we make sure the light always catches the truth." The air in the Pentagon hearing room was heavy, almost electric. For weeks, Sarah Keegan had navigated a labyrinth of bureaucracy, misinformation, and whispered threats. Every step she had taken, every precise shot she had fired, had led to this room. Now, the final confrontation was inevitable. Admiral Dalton Reeves sat at the center of the board table, wrists still in a brace, but pride thoroughly shattered. Across from him, Vice Admiral Huntley presided, flanked by Voss and several high-ranking officials from multiple branches. Cameras from authorized channels were recording everything not for the public, but for history, for accountability. Reeves' eyes bore into Sarah as she entered. "You think this ends here?" He spat. I've survived scrutiny before. Sarah met his glare without flinching. You underestimated me once. I won't make that mistake again. Huntley rapped the gavel. This session will address allegations of misconduct, insubordination, and manipulation of official records concerning the July 12th Leave Fire incident. Reeves leaned forward. Lieutenant Commander Keegan's actions were aggressive, reckless, and set a dangerous precedent. Sarah raised a hand slightly. With respect, sir, every action I took was in response to imminent danger. You attempted to grab a loaded .50 caliber rifle during a live fire exercise. I issued 2 verbal warnings. Then I acted according to protocol to prevent potential loss of life. She paused, letting her words sink in. The footage confirms this. Every step I took was measured, deliberate, and necessary. Voss tapped the table, bringing up a digital display of the range footage, alongside the newly discovered historical reprimand from Reeves' past. The room fell silent as the evidence played in sequence. The Admiral's previous violations, the warning Sarah had given, and finally, the 6 flawless shots that had followed. Reeves' jaw tightened. His attempts to manipulate perception were crumbling in real time. Admiral Reeves, Huntley said slowly, evidence indicates a pattern of behavior inconsistent with safe command practices. Moreover, documentation suggests interference with classified materials. You will have the opportunity to respond, but the facts are clear. Reeves' face was rigid. This is a witch hunt. A smear campaign led by a subordinate and a complicit commander. He spat, pointing at Voss. Voss leaned back. Subordinate? Sir, your actions endangered personnel. Lieutenant Commander Keegan upheld the regulations you swore to enforce. The video, the records, and the reports all confirm her integrity. Marcus, who had been quietly observing, whispered to Sarah, You're doing it. You're actually doing it. She nodded subtly. It's not over yet. Watch the finish. Huntley's gavel rapped again. All testimony and evidence considered. The board has concluded the following. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Keegan acted in accordance with safety protocol, demonstrated exceptional skill under duress, and prevented potential catastrophe. No disciplinary action will be taken. Admiral Reeves' actions will be subject to a separate investigation regarding negligence, interference with classified materials, and obstruction of justice. Reeves' hands clenched. His face was pale, and for the first time, raw fear flickered behind his eyes. The board adjourned, leaving him seated and speechless as officers filed out. Outside the room, reporters were waiting, though access was strictly controlled. Voss motioned Sarah forward. Lieutenant Commander Keegan, a journalist began, you just cleared your name, but public opinion has been intense. How do you respond to the scrutiny? Sarah's gaze was steady. I did what any responsible officer should do. My actions weren't about ego, publicity, or fame. They were about safety, discipline, and integrity. That's what I hope the public remembers. She didn't mention the months of shadow games, the manipulations, or the threats that had come from Reeves. She didn't need to. Her actions had spoken louder than any words. Reeves, meanwhile, retreated to his office. Calls from loyal subordinates came in one by one, each trying to salvage what little influence he had left. The official investigation into his conduct was no longer optional. It was inevitable. Classified communications were subpoenaed, digital fingerprints traced, and every attempt to obscure evidence catalogued. He realized, too late, that his reputation, once untouchable, was unraveling. The irony was cruel. In attempting to control the narrative, he had ensured that history would remember him not for command, but for failure. Sarah returned to the desert the following morning, rifle in hand. The sand stretched endlessly, the sun rising gold over the dunes. For months, This place had been the stage of triumph and tension. Now it was her sanctuary. Marcus joined her, carrying the spotting scope and a notebook. "You ever get tired of proving yourself?" he asked lightly. Sarah checked her scope, adjusting for the wind. "Never. This isn't about proving myself to them. It's about proving it to me." They went through the motions of target practice, 6 shots, one after another. Each bullet struck precisely. She wasn't performing for anyone. No cameras, no observers, no politics. Just herself, the weapon, and the wind. When she finished, she set the rifle down, closed her eyes for a moment, and exhaled. A sense of calm settled over her, the storm of months finally quieting. Back in Washington, the investigation into Reeves concluded. He was formally relieved of all command responsibilities and recommended for administrative separation. The Navy's leadership publicly stated that his conduct endangered personnel and violated the principles of trust and discipline. Sarah's name remained untarnished. Her courage, precision, and adherence to protocol had not only defended lives, but upheld the integrity of the Navy itself. She had faced hierarchy, ego, and manipulation, and emerged unbroken. Months later, Sarah stood in a training auditorium, speaking to a new class of recruits. The room was filled with young officers, attentive, eager to learn from the woman who had become a legend. "Discipline is not about fear," she said, voice steady. "It's about responsibility. It's about knowing when to act, and acting with precision and integrity. Your training will prepare you for the world outside these walls. But your judgment, that's what will save lives." She glanced at the rifle leaning against the lectern. 6 shots, 6 targets, 1 perfect lesson in the balance of skill and morality. The recruits listened in silence, some taking notes, some simply absorbing the presence of a woman who had navigated fire and shadow without faltering. Later, Sarah walked outside the academy, Marcus by her side. "Feels good to be back in the open," he said. Sarah nodded, looking toward the horizon, where the sun was beginning its descent over the Pacific. "It's not about open spaces," she said. "It's about clarity. Once you see the line, you know which way to move. You just have to follow it without hesitation." Marcus laughed softly. "You make it sound so simple." "It's not," she admitted, "but it's necessary." Somewhere far away, in a quiet office, Admiral Reeves packed his files. The last shred of influence slipping through his fingers. He stared out at the city lights and muttered to himself, "This isn't over." But for Sarah Keegan, the battle had ended. She had faced the threat, maintained her integrity, and emerged victorious, not because she sought glory, but because she refused to compromise truth, skill, and honor. And in that, she had won the war that mattered most. The desert wind whispered across the dunes. 6 targets lay silently in the sand. The rifle rested at her side. And Sarah Keegan, sniper and sentinel, finally allowed herself to smile. The world had tried to define her, but she had defined herself. She took one last breath of the dry desert air and whispered, "For truth, always."